Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Chief Content Officer at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week in Illinois in Focus, we'll discuss a U.S. Department of Justice filing in its lawsuit against Illinois and Chicago's sanctuary policies that details examples of why the DOJ claims those policies threaten public safety. Illinois' senior U.S. Senator Dick Durbin will not seek re-election in 2026. What does that mean for the state's political landscape? All that and more when we return.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. In court filings related to the Trump administration's challenge of Illinois and Chicago's sanctuary policies, the Department of Justice cited examples of how those impede immigration officials from doing their job to protect the public safety. Joining me to discuss this is the Center Square's Illinois editor, Greg Bishop. Greg, you reported on the filing this week. Tell us about those examples.
So the back and forth over the state's sanctuary policies for non-citizens in federal courts between the U.S. Department of Justice and the Trump administration and the state of Illinois, Cook County, and the city of Chicago. And the most recent filing that the DOJ put in was a statement of facts supporting their motion for summary judgment against Illinois' migrant sanctuary policies. And they gave an example of as recent as January, an illegal alien was being held in the Cook County jail. And because Illinois law prevented Cook County jailers from cooperating or communicating with the ICE officials, immigration officials, the individual is released from jail, and then the DOJ says that illegal alien was arrested elsewhere 17 days later accused of murder. That's just one of the examples that they gave. They gave two other examples of illegal aliens in jail for abusing a minor, allegedly, and then being let out and being arrested again for another instance of abusing a minor. And they also discussed how they've been to Illinois prisons in the parking lots wanting to pick up illegal aliens being released, but were told by local officials to leave the premises. So these were several examples that the DOJ gave in their statement of facts supporting a motion for summary judgment. Now, I asked the governor earlier this week, he was at an unrelated event here in Jacksonville in central Illinois, and I asked him about how, with those examples the DOJ is providing, how is it that the state's migrant sanctuary policies aren't impacting public safety? And the governor simply reverted back to what he's said before, even before Trump was elected, that he wants violent criminal non-citizens deported. But he said that the DOJ has to get a federal criminal warrant, and the state does not honor federal civil detainers for non-citizens. So the case continues, Dan. This is something that obviously has got national attention. It was among the first actions that U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi took to hold Illinois to account for the Trust Act, which prohibits local and state police from cooperating with federal immigration officials, and Illinois' Way Forward Act that took that a step forward and prohibited local officials from even allowing for non-citizens to be in local county jail beds. So clearly, the fight's not over. You have the state. They filed a motion to dismiss, and in their most recent response to the state and the court about looking for a schedule for discovery and for briefings, the state said that the DOJ has not made their case yet, and they're asking for the overall situation to be put on hold until the court deals with their motion to dismiss. So, Dan, as we see a lot of times when it comes to the courts, it's legal wrangling and scheduling and potential delays. It's going to be a long time, I think, before this issue actually gets resolved by the federal courts.
Republicans in the state of Illinois have called on the governor, the state, the city of Chicago, Cook County, to get rid of those sanctuary policies, calling them illegal and a threat to public safety. But Governor Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago and others are steadfast that those policies will remain in place despite the Trump's Department of Justice going after them.
Yeah, and part of the rationale that we heard, even when these policies were debated years ago and enacted years ago, supporters say that they don't want non-citizens in the state who may be victims of crime being apprehensive about reporting those crimes. So they wanted to make sure police weren't asking for an individual's immigration status. But when you get down to it and you see these examples from the DOJ, and it's not just in Illinois, the Lake and Riley Act passed. That's another thing the DOJ pointed to being enacted that includes a whole host of different crimes that if illegal aliens are, being held for those, they should be able to have access to those individuals. ICE should be able to detain those individuals. The Lake and Riley Act passed Congress and was signed by the president. And the DOJ says that's just another instance here where Illinois is not cooperating and indeed impeding and obstructing federal immigration officials. The rationale of we want to make sure that non-citizens can report crimes without the threat of being deported. I don't know how that goes up against those examples of an illegal alien being arrested for a crime like vehicle theft and then being released from a jail without ICE being notified, and then they get arrested later for a murder. The governor, he said, listen, he wants violent criminals out as well. And I asked if there needs to be more clarity in the law to allow for better cooperation in such instances. And Pritzker defaulted back to saying all they need to do is get a criminal detention warrant, and they should be able to access the jails. I believe all of this is going to come out in court documents with possibly even more examples, because the laws are still in place, even as the courts handle this case. And clearly, we will have that debate in the court eventually. Just when is the big question here.
And listeners can keep up with any updates on this story at thecentersquare.com. Greg, U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, who served in the Senate since 1996 after previously serving in the U.S. House since 1982, announced Wednesday of this week that he will not seek re-election in 2016. Tell us about that and what it means.
Yeah, the 2026 election, Dan, is going to be very interesting in Illinois. Not only is there going to be an open U.S. Senate seats with Durbin not seeking re-election, you've also got the gubernatorial race in 2026, where it's still yet known if Governor J.B. Pritzker will be seeking a third term. That possibility could already be thrown up in the air because Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton has announced she's running for Durbin's open seat. So names are already starting to surface as to who is going to be the Democrats' nominee or possibly run for the position. And we're also seeing some speculation of others on the other side of the aisle who are looking for that spot. So this is really kind of changing the political landscape and the prognostication that a lot of us political reporters do in the newsrooms as to how this is going to play out. For years, Durbin's been, the whip, the second in command of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate. He chaired the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, a very high-profile committee, when Democrats were in power. Now he's the minority spokesman. But clearly, Durbin had a large role in the U.S. Senate. And if he steps down or retires and doesn't run again, as he announced this week, he's no longer the senior U.S. senator, and that would be Tammy Duckworth, who would become the senior U.S. senator from Illinois. So Durbin making the announcement in a highly produced video, talking about, the honor of serving. He didn't just serve in the Senate, as you mentioned. He served in the U.S. House, starting back in 1982, a year before I was born, Dan. But he says it's time for him to pass the torch. Now, Durbin does have a news conference here in Springfield later this afternoon outside of his home. And he's expected to be pelted with questions about who should replace him. I highly doubt he's going to announce any kind of endorsement, but maybe he needs to share with reporters what kind of qualities he's looking in whoever is going to be the nominee for Democrats. But then on the other side of the aisle, Dan, there's going to be a lot of eyes on various people who may rise to the surface. One who seems to have tested the waters a little is Peoria Republican U.S. Congressman Darren LaHood. His campaign office put out a statement yesterday critical of Durbin's tenure, saying it's time to turn the page and talking about how LaHood has had very large vote margins in his district and has pushed for conservative values, but he stopped short of saying that he's running for the U.S. Senate seat. So we've got a year and a half plus before the election. But before that, we're going to have some primaries in the Republican and the Democrat party. So the 2026 election is going to be an interesting one with that open U.S. Senate seat, but it's made even more interesting, Dan, with the prospect of Governor J.B. Pritzker. Is he going to run for that third term? Is that third term possibly going to be a stepping stone for a bid for the White House in 2028? But how is all of that turned asunder here with Durbin's announcement, especially with Juliana Stratton announcing she's running for Durbin's seat? We'll be watching on the edge of our seat and reporting at thecentersquare.com.
Oh, interesting analysis, Greg, of the political landscape in Illinois. Durbin, who is 80 years old, I guess it's not a surprise, this announcement coming when it did. No Republicans in Illinois have been elected to statewide office, including the U.S. Senate. As you mentioned, Senator Tammy Duckworth, she's also a Democrat. What are the prospects for Republicans in this race?
We've had statewide Republicans in the past. Senator Mark Kirk, for instance, was a Republican in the U.S. Senate for years. We had Republican Governor Bruce Rauner for a term. Judy Bartopinka, another one. But it's been years, Dan. We've been essentially under a uniparty rule here at the Illinois State House from not just who runs both chambers of the General Assembly, but also the statewide constitutional officers from U.S. Senate to governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, comptroller, treasurer, the whole gamut. So we do see, though, if you look at the most recent election and just as the Trump gauge, in 2016, Trump had like 40% of the vote. In 2020, he had about 42% of the vote. Well, now he had in 2024 about 45% of the vote in Illinois. Is that an indication of people wanting to go another direction and possibly, have some mix in Illinois and actually be a purple state instead of a blue state? That's going to be interesting because, the U.S. Senate is not dictated by political maps like members of the House or members of the Illinois Senate are, right? They have specific jurisdictions that Democrats have drawn to be favorable to Democrats. So that's really why you get the makeup in the General Assembly we have with Democrats dominating. But for the U.S. Senate, the entire state gets to vote. So it's not stuck in one particular jurisdiction that may be Democrat heavy. So how that plays into who could be the next Illinois U.S. Senator, very much is going to be at play. And obviously those sentiments, as we've seen in Chicago, the various groups, grassroots groups, Chicago Go Red or Flip Red. These are clearly some indications there may be a political shift in the works. If it hasn't already gone that way. So clearly a lot of different crystal balls are going to be brought out and people speculating about what the outcome is going to be. But honestly, it's probably going to come down to the wire as to what that outcome will be and if there will be a change of the political landscape.
Yeah, and of course, next year's midterms will be crucial to determine whether Republicans can maintain control of the U.S. Senate or whether Democrats can retake the majority there. Republicans currently hold 53 of the 100 seats, a slight majority over Democrats. Democrats have 45 of the seats, but with two independent senators also caucusing with Democrats. It's essentially a 53 to 47 advantage for Republicans. So next year's elections will determine who controls that senior branch of government. Republican elected officials in Illinois are criticizing the Illinois High School Association's response to their letter, criticizing the association's decision to allow biological males to compete against biological females in girls and women's sports, biological males who identify as females. Tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, this is something stemming from last month when House Republicans here in Illinois sent the Illinois High School Association a letter asking how they're going to respond to President Donald Trump's executive order prohibiting biological men from competing in biological women's sports. And it took about a month for the IHSA to respond. And they said they're kind of in a little bit of a tight spot because they have, obviously, the Trump order. But in Illinois, they say that the Illinois Human Rights Act recognizes an individual's gender identity. And ultimately, they could run afoul if they don't allow for individuals who, identify as the opposite gender perform in the opposite gender's sporting arena. And they also said that the local school districts are the ones who make these decisions. And the IHSA is a nonprofit. They don't get state or local money, they say. But Republicans even pushed back on that and said that the IHSA has a lot more influence in all of this than they think. So they're actually calling for some legislation that would make it clear on this issue of trans athletes in sports, especially for high school students, raising the issue of safety concerns when it comes to having a male perform sports in a female sporting event. We also have Congresswoman Mary Miller. She has called for an investigation into Illinois, a federal investigation. And as we've seen in Maine, the DOJ is suing that state for not complying with Trump's order. So how are these issues and these debates going to ultimately pan out? Will it be a loss of federal funding for the state of Illinois for not recognizing the Trump order? Will it be the state of Illinois modifying its policies? That doesn't seem like that's going to happen, as the debate has spilled onto the House floor just in points of personal privilege here in Illinois, with some pretty vocal back and forth from opponents of trans athletes to those who support trans athletes. It's a hot button issue here at the state capitol.
Yeah, and in the main instance, the Trump administration has threatened to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars in federal money to the state if it doesn't change its policies. I mean, Illinois very well could be next in the Trump administration's sights. And of course, we're in the middle of budget season during the legislative session in Springfield, and those federal dollars are key to passing a balanced budget. Last word on this, Greg.
Yeah, we're talking like $10 billion for K through 12 education that the state spends, and then you've got even more on the federal side that's passed through to the state. It's going to be interesting, especially as we get to the May 31st deadline to pass a budget, and what exactly is going to drop between now and then coming out of Washington, D.C. for Illinois.
Greg, Republicans in Illinois have been critical of the state's estate tax, which when a family member dies and they're wealthy and they pass their estate on to their, such as family farmers, on to their heirs, the estate tax essentially requires the heirs to pay significant taxes on that land if it be farmland. They've been highly critical of that. Governor J.B. Pritzker said recently that he would support a change to the estate tax, but only if Republicans came up with how to pay for that lost tax revenue. Well, Illinois House Republicans this week are saying that you can pay for it by essentially cutting spending on non-citizen programs. Tell us more.
Yeah, and you got to think too, Dan, we're getting ready to see a budget that's the most expensive state budget in state history. Close to $55 billion in spending. Just like 10, 12 years ago, the budget was like $32 billion. So you could see how much the budget's increased. So you combine that with, the idea of trying to find a couple of $100 million, in state spending to save so they can make way for the potential lost revenue of changing the estate tax for family farmers. And Dan, one thing I think, family farmers might push back on and say they're not wealthy. They may have a lot of land, but they're really, farming on the margins. And when it comes to that land, they are essentially assessed on that whenever they become an heir. And sometimes they're having to sell chunks of that land just to pay the taxes. So when the governor, at Ag Day earlier this month, he spoke, and then State Senator Andrew Chesney got up to speak. And Chesney said we need to address the estate tax for family farms. Pritzker clapped. And then he told Andrew Chesney, as Chesney was taking off the stage, he told him after, talking with the press, he shared what he told Chesney, saying, hey, come to me with some cut ideas. Let's try to make this work. But Pritzker didn't give his assessment of what could be cut. Well, earlier this week, Republican State Representative Wayne Rosenthal, along with others pushing to save family farms, I asked him, I said, what do you want to see cut? And Rosenthal simply said, the Democrats are the ones in charge. They're the ones that are going to have to assess their priorities. And then I followed up and asked, well, what kinds of priorities do you think are problematic here? And he went right to that migrant spending, the non-citizen cost for taxpayers. And that has exceeded $1 billion, for the healthcare, for the housing, for the, attorney's fees, for a whole host of things. So clearly it's an issue of priorities. Rosenthal says, do Democrats want to keep the family farms in Illinois, family farms? Or do they want to give priority to non-citizens in the state of Illinois? An interesting dynamic. Will that change the direction of what happens with the estate tax? Again, we're here on the ground at the Illinois State Capitol watching closely, and we'll be reporting that out at thecentersquare.com.
One more story here. Restaurant workers rallied at the state capitol this week, demanding an end to the tipped wage. Opponents of that call say it would lead to lost jobs, fewer hours for restaurant employees, etc. Just tell us a little bit about the rally and the issue.
Yeah, and this really is kind of a follow-up from last year where a similar effort failed to advance. And as of right now, the same effort seems to not really be going anywhere, as the pushback from restaurateurs and even some who work in restaurants not wanting to end the tipped wage. The Restaurant Association says people already make $15 an hour. They have to. If they don't make that with tips, then the restaurant has to pay them up to what would bring them to that $15 an hour for that specific day. So if they were to be required to do that $15 an hour, if not more, like in Chicago, for instance, they say they're going to be limiting jobs. Some may have to close down, let alone the extra cost on consumers who may see the price of a burger increase even more after dealing with inflation. So the group pushing to end the tipped wage may be getting frustrated at the lack of movement on this issue, but it doesn't look like it's got too many legs for the variety of concerns that have been raised in this.
Thank you for joining us today, Greg. Listeners can keep up to this story and all the stories we talked about and more at thecentersquare.com.